Welcome to BrandBusters with your hosts, James Schwinn and Sean Lee. Together, we bust open the latest in CPG, retail media, and life, or whatever the we want. And for today's episode, we got something special cooked up for ya. Extra spicy. Take it away, Sean.
Let's go. Episode 13. Great to have everybody here. Today, we're going to go back to our original format, and we've got some great interviews lined up in the next few. But James and I are going to chat with you a bit about the NFL and some private equity interests, which is interesting. I also heard the Big 12 conference is shopping around a private equity deal. Then we're going to talk about Amazon's launch of a new direct from China, lower priced products on their site to compete with Temu and Shein. And finally, we'll cap it off with talking audio logos or sonic logos, which are making a comeback in the age of Reels and TikTok. So I've always loved them. We're going to talk some of our favorite jingles and sonic logos from our childhood and the value of doing it for your brand. Yeah. But I just got back from 10 days in New Hampshire up at Lake Sunapee, about an hour north of Boston with the family. So I am still a little jumbled trying to figure it all out here. So we'll, I'm on vacation brain right now, but we'll chat CPG.
And for you listeners that didn't know, Sean also saw Zach Bryan a few weeks back up at Buckeye Country Fest in Columbus.
Buckeye Country Fest. We were 27 rows back. I am officially what my wife calls the equivalent of a Zach Bryan Swiftie. So I don't really know what that means, but I guess I'm obsessed with Zach Bryan. So I was able to, for his finale, which is he does this like 10-minute long bit to a finale song called Revival, and I was able to dart to the front row for some people who had left early to hit the parking garage. So I had a front row seat for the 10-minute finale. So I felt like I was a teenage girl at a Taylor Swift concert.
My one question is, was it a prerequisite to attend wearing jorts?
I thought about it. I thought about going full Canadian tuxedo, but Robin put the kibosh in that. But I did order a Stetson cowboy hat, which she also thought was a bit absurd, and a denim Western shirt. But you got to fit the part. She did not let me go full Canadian tuxedo, though.
That's fair. She's a good sport for supporting. And I think Sean went to the album release party at a bar in Cincinnati or Northern Kentucky the week after that. So definitely got his Zach Bryan fix.
I got my fix in. I thought, while we're talking marketing, I thought it's kind of fascinating because I know we've talked Taylor Swift in the past, but I think what Zach Bryan's done is almost been like the anti-establishment person. Like, he produces his own music. It's not necessarily the most polished. It's a little rushed, but the lyrics are really good. It feels very authentic. I mean, he's doing something right because he's selling back-to-back stadium shows out, which there are only a handful of people in America that are doing that right now. But even down to like his album release, like, he was collecting user-generated footage of people to put in his latest music video. So it's just his song to people's iPhone videos that they send him, doing like American type stuff, which I think is really cool to engage his fan base. And then his album was called The Great American Bar Scene, and he picked 22 bars across the country to give them the album a week early to play on repeat. And they were in like the most random spots. I don't know how this bar in Covington called Larry's got selected. Shout out Larry's. But it was awesome. I had never been there before. A cool little dive bar with a, pool table, hole in the wall. But I just think it's a really cool, from a marketing tactic, this like to see an artist that's really come up, kind of eschewing the traditional marketing and the labels, and really letting his fans do his marketing for him on TikTok and through Reels, and through these kind of word of mouth events. I just think it's a cool thing, and probably a great thing for music, that it's not controlled by the gatekeepers as much anymore.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I digress. So we can get back to why we're actually here. And James, you want to talk about the NFL and its recent development with private equity interests, and it probably has a lot to do with advertising and the skyrocketing TV contracts that these leagues keep getting every handful of years.
Yeah. And on that note, rumor has it Amazon is in the pole position with the NBA to score a $76 billion media contract, though TNT, who's aired those rights for the last 4 decades, is saying that they will match. But it's going to cost, I think, Amazon $1.8 billion a year plus for these media rights. So any major brand, expect your Amazon rep to come haggle you for some additional media dollars on Prime. But Yeah.
I
So
just
on
don't
the
know how
meteorites,
TNT competes in like in a dying cable business. Amazon seems to have enough money to do whatever the heck they want.
yeah, I think it's
Do
gonna
we
be
get to keep
tougher.
Charles? Do we get to keep Charles Barkley if TNT wins? That's the question.
I thought Charles is retiring, so I think does Amazon pull out the moves to keep Barkley on? I don't know. We'll
Maybe.
see. But transition from the NBA and what was floated in the public, what's probably in the works for a while now, the NFL and private equity. Coming back to May, Sean and I unfortunately did not get invited to Alan Coe's Sun Valley Conference. Roger Goodell did. I know Sean Lee, James Schwinn, Roger
Yeah.
Goodell, all the same.
Billionaire Boys Club. Why weren't we there? I don't know. I guess we got some work to do on the podcast to
Yeah,
get an invite next year.
maybe 2025 is our year. But the big trend in sports with all the media rights is we're seeing team valuations skyrocketing across both men's and women's sports, which is great. Raj did concede that the NFL is open to PE taking a minor ownership position of up to 10%. And this would really be the starting point cap. This is far lower than what all other major leagues, including MLS, NBA, and MLB and NHL allow, which is up to 30% as the cap. So I think this is a good starting point. But the driving cause of like, why would PE, of course, want to sink their teeth into this? From a financial standpoint, NFL teams just within the last 7 years have nearly doubled in value. So the average NFL franchise, and there's 32 in the NFL for those of you that don't know, average valuation is 2.34 billion. Ooh. Now it's over 5.1 billion. Comparatively, the average NBA team is valued at 4 billion and MLB teams at 2.36. So it is harder for a league that historically favored like family offices or individuals to be owners to put up that kind of cash to continue to invest and kind of drive this growing sport. So will be really interesting to monitor. I mean, 10% is nothing. I mean, I think there'll be financial interest for the firms, but that's not a majority position that can really drive voting power on certain matters. So Sean, what's your take with your exposure on different boards and background?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and I'd be curious what the actual deal is because if valuations of these teams are essentially doubling every, what is it, probably 5 years at this pace, if it keeps up, why would any of the owners want to give up 10% ownership interest? Like, doesn't seem like it makes that much sense. But what I thought was interesting is in college football, the Big 12 conference, which is kind of the third, maybe fourth, depending on how you spin it, conference in U.S. college football. Their average payout to teams is like 50 to 60 million a year. And then the top two, the Big 10 and the SEC, are paying between 80 to 100 million a year per team. So they have an interesting model where they're shopping international rights to private equity, where they wouldn't get a seat. They'd get a seat on the board, but wouldn't have voting rights. And they would get a claim to all international revenues like Europe or Mexico. So I think that's a really interesting play because then it's really all incremental at that point, because if those firms want to drive value in those markets, they can capture the upside. For the NFL, I mean, you've got so many billionaires that already are owners. I think of the 32 teams, 30 of the team owners are currently billionaires. So I don't know what the 10% private equity actually does for them. But it is interesting. There's got to be something to it from maybe all the owners will pool together and put the money in to be that private equity firm and find some tax advantages there. That's the only thing I can think of. Or maybe somebody who owns a media company and is going to help drive them is going to invest.
I think the other trend to monitor is not necessarily for the existing owners, but in the wake of, I think, what the Celtics recently announced that they're going to be going up for sale. Are you seeing more of a cohort of people? So for new potential owners that are trying to get in, is there a pool? You see this pretty commonly in different bids for teams. I think with Inter Miami, it wasn't just David Beckham. It was him and a cohort of other investors. You see this with Wrexham and Ryan Reynolds and Ron McElhaney. So I think as an entry point for new ownerships is where this is going to get really interesting. So I imagine you're going to see a PE firm with some type of celebrity and business owner that's going to get their both feet wet here.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, the reality is advertising to a mass group in the United States is getting harder and harder. And the few touch points that you can actually reach people in real time live are NFL games. I mean, it's probably the number one viewed game at any given time. Next is probably, the NBA, then the MLB, which is a little bit more regional. So I think these team valuations are only going to continue to go up because it's really the only place that you can reach somebody where it's not pre-recorded and they're kind of forced to sit and watch your ad. So it will be interesting to see where this goes, but I don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Well, with that, we will talk about another interesting business play, which is my favorite topic, and that is Amazon and all the interesting things that they do to make us brand owners pull out our hair. But one of the things that we've talked about on this podcast before is that of all the third-party sellers, which make up the majority of Amazon.com's revenue, 50% are Chinese sellers today, competing with US-based brand owners and brands, all of that. But Amazon has been really worried about Temu and Shein out of China selling very low-priced goods direct from Chinese manufacturers with a much longer ship time. So Amazon was never going to sit back and just kind of take it from those two. So they recently announced that they're going to create a section of their site called, I don't know what they're actually calling it, but it's a direct from China model on their site that you can go to where you're going to get things at a much significantly or cheaper price than you would on the regular Amazon site, but you're not getting prime shipping. Everything's going to be shipped directly from China to your house. So it may take, 5 to 10 days to arrive versus the 1 to 2 that you're expecting. But the data that Amazon was playing on is there is a cohort of consumers that are fine if they can get the cheapest price. They're willing to trade off fast delivery and not pay a premium for that. The other thing that I found that was really interesting is that for apparel specifically for these direct to Chinese manufacturers, Amazon dropped its referral fee that you pay from 17% for apparel to 5% for items under $15. So really encouraging higher volume, similar to what at very low prices, similar to what Shein and Temu are doing. But I think it's probably good for Amazon that they're doing this. I think it may be bad for anybody that's currently buying from a Chinese manufacturer, slapping a brand on it and reselling, especially if these companies can just sell their products much cheaper, because it's going to be harder to compete on brand if it's just a Me Too product being manufactured in China. I think the other interesting thing is Amazon is still trying to have its hand in it. So typically in the US, a seller would, the current model, if a Chinese seller selling on Amazon, is they would ship it ocean freight into an Amazon FBA warehouse, and then it would get to the end shopper. And, there's a lot of costs involved in that. Today, all the Chinese sellers will basically send their product to an Amazon-owned warehouse in China. Amazon will air freight it to the shopper directly to their house. So they've kind of still taken control of the quality assurance model in China by opening their own, essentially Amazon FBA Chinese warehouse and then shipping it through China Post to U.S. Postal Service to the end shopper. So just kind of a fascinating development. I think the risk for Amazon is, if product quality goes down, it could hurt their brand. But if it's in a separate section and people understand what they're doing, probably not that much risk. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think the interesting dynamic to monitor here, especially with apparel brands, which are some of the most complex if you think about all the variations, the colors, the sizes, there's so many long tail ASINs that create operational issues. And you got to think the existing seller base might be pushing back, especially with them being willing to drop the referral fee. I think Nike is an interesting development here as well, who, I think very loudly made it aware that they were going to jump away from Amazon a few years ago after a brief hiatus. Now it sounds like they'll be coming back onto Amazon as their direct-to-consumer efforts didn't meet expectations from a number standpoint for you all. They about a 20% drop in their share price and a loss of $28 billion in value. Going that shift, that didn't pan out. So again, I think the thing that you bring up, Sean, I think you're absolutely right on for anyone that's sourcing from China right now and trying to throw a haphazard brand together, like they're going to suffer. But I think for like the larger apparel brands that might have more bargaining power, if they see this precedent of a referral fee being lowered, are they going to try to jump on that and use that as leverage against Amazon? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the thing that I find really interesting, and Amazon being the powerhouse that it is, and you're already starting to see this play out in the public relations narrative, is Amazon launches this Chinese Temu Shein competitor shipping direct from manufacturer at much lower prices, basically copying their model, right, and controlling it end to end. Now in certain states, I've heard that Amazon's been lobbying to try get Temu and some of these companies shut down over like data and privacy laws, and saying that they're fast and loose with your data. And there's a big campaign to kind of smear them on that. I don't know if it's true or not. It's just what you read. And now there are a few states trying to sue Temu, and I don't know if Shein's been involved on some data privacy things, but you have to imagine that Amazon's savvy enough to probably be funding that or lobbying that or be behind that. Because if you shut them down and then you take over the, cheap direct from Chinese manufacturer market, it's only a win for Amazon.
I mean,
they're probably a win for consumers too, right? Because at least you get some trust with Amazon that you don't get potentially in the with Temu and Shein.
I mean, it's the TikTok legislation, like playbook right here, copy paste, right? Yeah. So everyone,
you have to imagine Instagram, and you have to imagine that Zuckerberg has a huge vested interest in TikTok being shut down.
Yeah, or being forced to sell to a U.S. entity. So
he would probably somehow take control of.
Yeah, while he's wakeboarding, holding the American flag.
Speaking of which, I mean, talk about a comeback, man. Like, he went from probably like nerdy, hated tech guy to whoever his publicist firm is. They should be paid whatever they want. I mean, they've really turned him around to, he's going to UFC fights. He's doing mixed martial arts. He used to wear like zinc, like sunblock and be pasty white. Now he's tan. He raises his own Wagyu beef. Like, they've really, I don't know if he's actually cool, but they've done a huge revamp of his image to make him more relatable and cool. And I thought it was a win, him drinking a Coors and wake surfing with the American flag. I mean, you're not seeing Bill Gates do that. No. And you could see, I think Elon Musk tweeted something about it. You could sense a little bit of jealousy on the traction that post was getting.
Yeah. Who was supposed to duke it out? Was it Zuck?
Elon and Zuck. Yeah. And then Zuck broke his leg or something while he was training, and then Elon said his mom wasn't going to let him do it, or that he needed to get a neck surgery. So they both kind of like walked up to the brink, and then both pulled the exit or the off ramp at the end.
I think I would have wanted to watch that fight over the Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. Close,
no, for sure.
Close second, but I would definitely pay to see Zuck and Elon go at it.
I think it'd be great
with Joe Rogan calling the fight.
That's the only way that it could have been done.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about that, I mean, we're talking about great PR and marketing rehabs. Something that is really come back around. I remember my childhood growing up, jingles and kind of audio logos or the Old Spice whistle, things like that were huge and really a hallmark of almost every TV commercial. It seems like they're making a comeback. What can you tell us about that, James?
Yeah. So lately, with sound on scrolling up across platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, more brands are licensing music and even creating their own songs. MLS most notably hired Don Electron and Gatopo to create the theme song for the 2024 season, and actually just rolled out their Summer is Calling theme with their backing music as well, with all the major leagues basically out. NHL, NBA wrapped up, NFL this season, MLB hitting their all-star break. This is a great time for MLS to shine, so they're making a big push. So they're probably one of the more notable entities that are kind of taking this approach. But there's a really cool group and company called AMP that recently conducted a study. So they took 15 logos, 12 real, 3 fake, and they had this kind of ranking of audiovisual logos. So not just, they looked at them as like static with no audio, no motion. And then they had versions where there's audio and then audio and motion. So the audio-visual logos were rated as more authentic, relatable, trustworthy, unique, attention-grabbing, and likable than visual-only logos. Taking a step further, the logos that were tested with no motion, unsynced motion, and sync motion, the winner was synced motion. I think you see this probably on a day-to-day basis with like Spotify. I think if you pull up an artist or a song, you can kind of see some artists are really great at promoting other upcoming shows or different art, or it's engaging, but it's another touch point to drive more engagement and usage. So I think it's an interesting trend that I think actually the music industry, tying it back and going full circle to how we started with Zach Bryan at the beginning of the podcast. I think they're leading the way, and other brands are starting to take note. And Sean's got some good examples pulled up, but from a recent ranking within the top 10, the best kind of audiovisual brands out there: MasterCard, Shell, AutoZone, Old Spice, No surprise there.
Oh yeah.
And Burger King, who does not have a Sonic logo, but they do have catchy songs. Have you heard their Whopper
Yeah.
Whopper Junior Bacon, which both my boys request I play on Spotify to no end when I have them. So
Yeah.
I just hope it doesn't make my 2024 rap list on Spotify. That'd be pretty
Yeah, it might. You
embarrassing.
never
But
know. Miss
we'll see.
Rachel will probably make mine somehow.
Can't go wrong with Miss Rachel.
Yeah, Miss Rachel's great. I think I see Miss Rachel as much as I see my wife, to be completely honest, but I don't hate it. Yeah, I think it's awesome. I'm so happy that this is making a comeback, and I think the mediums are finally letting it, like TikTok and Reels are letting it make a comeback, because I remember there was a college marketing class that I took. The professor did his whole like dissertation PhD on earworms, which are basically either songs or logos that get stuck in your head and are incredibly memorable. Like if you hear it, it'll take you back to like the time and place that you heard it. And I think the jingles, the Old Spice whistle, those things are so much more memorable than any other brand asset. And, back when radio and TV were the main mediums, it made a ton of sense to do that. Then it got so scattered with, static Facebook ads and motion graphics with no sound. And I'm glad that we're back here, because I think a really good TV commercial or a really good radio spot capped off with the jingle, even if people don't pay attention, you hear that Old Spice whistle in the background, or you hear the AutoZone thing. I can already hear it in the tone in my head. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But we wanted to share a couple examples of ones that we like. Let's see. I'm going to try to present here. What was your most memorable one or favorite one growing up, James?
Favorite? I don't know on that. But Napa Know How. Napa Know How. That one always comes to mind.
It's a banger.
Yep. Listen to that on repeat. Not so much. Think about back to AOL. You Got Mail.
Oh yeah, You Got Mail. And even like when it started up, it didn't have to make that like ding. Remember, like it like went through all the stages. That was just like a catchy little way to make you remember it.
Yeah, anyone that's Gen Z that's never used an Ethernet cable or had dial-up internet doesn't know the pain of it taking 5 minutes to connect to the internet. But those are that's embedded in my head as well.
For anybody that didn't know the pain of taking 30 minutes to download one stolen song on Napster, you're really missing out.
Yeah,
you kids and your Spotify. So here's my favorite. I was the Old Spice brand manager. I love the brand. We brought jingles back when I was there. It's really a great asset. So here we go. Everybody should be whistling this for the next week, because it won't come out of your head. Well, like huge. I mean, all the data that we had is if nobody paid attention to your TV commercial and they heard that at the end, Old Spice immediately registered in their brain. Like P&G went overboard, and we'd hook up like this helmet to people's brains, and they're like, when they heard the whistle, their like brain activity would just light up. So I think just a fantastic example.
Now, Sean, when you were developing that at Old Spice, was there a firm that would actually develop the jingle or the sound? Was that done internally? How many sounds were tested? I mean, what would go into that process?
Yeah, I mean, for the Old Spice, that had been around since like the 50s. So we just went back to the archives and brought it back and made sure that it was always there. But yeah, there's a ton of testing, a lot of like, some of it's like you just got to go with it, right? Because you can make anything memorable. We would do some like brainwave testing to see if we could elicit the kind of positive response in people's brains. Sounds a little creepy, but yeah, we would do a lot of stuff like that. But going back to that, when I founded the Zevo brand for P&G, I was really big on, we have to have a motion graphic logo. Like for anybody that wants to Google it, the V in Zevo looks like a little fly or a bug that's kind of there. So we had the bug kind of come in as the V and then like splat when it hit like into the logo. And we use that in all our social ads when we launched. I was very adamant that it had to be that way and couldn't be a static logo. We had a little splat sound that had like a buzz and the splat sound that was with it. That was back when people were viewing without audio, but I just assumed it would change at some point. So I made sure when we launched the brand, we developed the asset, which hopefully they're still using it, and hopefully that's working for them. But let me share another one. Let's do this. This was another banger and another favorite of mine. Growing up, I still have this like seared into my head.
Their hero held them tight. I'll start Folgers to brew. Mountain grown aroma coming through.
Folgers aroma roasted coffee made from mountain grown beans, richly roasted and finely ground for great waking up aroma.
Oh, what that aroma can do, brighter day for me and you. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
Like, what a banger. Like, they just don't make jingles like they used to.
I don't know about that one. Not a fan. Not a fan. Right. But I think some of the rationale too, Sean, like why is this working? As we're in the attention economy, brands need to create multi-sensory experiences. So visual is just not enough. Obviously, you can't necessarily do taste or touch necessarily from afar, maybe in a sampling context, if you're in CPG and food, in that case. But otherwise, audio and visual are the two. So if you're going to do that and be multi-pronged, you'll have a better chance of like penetrating consumers' attention and kind of create that, new experience and dopamine hit if it, patches with the right neurotransmitters there. So I think there is there's absolute science behind this as long as they get the right sounds.
Yeah. I mean, I think the further I've been out of like big company life, the more I'm just like, what makes sense at like a human level, or like, what do my kids respond to? What do I respond to? And I mean, just think about like for anybody that had like a life experience, when you got married, when you had your first kiss, when you did, were driving your car fast as a teenager and there was a song playing, like you almost always associate that song with like a life experience. So there's just something about audio that like deeply embeds itself into your brain. So like jingles make complete sense, even if you take all the like research and science out of it at a human level. Here's my favorite one as a kid, probably because I have severe ADD. But this is a banger. Let's go.
Oh yeah.
Meow Mix comes in 2 varieties, original and seafood middles. A medley of mackerel, tuna, and crunchy centers bursting with seafood flavor. Meow Mix tastes so good, cats ask.
I can smell those bags right now. I was a Meow Mix customer, and I haven't bought Meow Mix in a decade plus, probably 15 years, and I can smell it based on that.
That's great. It's great. I mean, it's wild. Could you imagine today, for anybody that's listening, if you're working at P&G or Unilever or any of the big companies, dedicating 25 seconds of your 30-second spot to literally just a black screen with a cat and a meow in the background. Like, it just doesn't happen that way anymore. But I think there's some like simple brilliance into how it used to be done. And there's a reason those things are so impressionable and memorable. Like, I don't remember any other commercials from my childhood. Remember that one. I remember the old Mentos spots. They had a banger of a jingle. Yeah. The Fresh Maker. But yeah, hopefully we get back to it. I think TikTok and Reels really allow brands to get more creative and start using audio in a much cooler way. Yep. And hopefully there's some brand people out here that are willing to take some risks on that. But with that, we are to the end here. If you like our podcast, if you've liked our interviews, go to LinkedIn, follow or friend James and I, where we don't bite, we promise. Follow the BrandBusters on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter. Go and hit the subscribe button on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, thank you for spending some time with us. Until next time, we've got a great interview lined up for the next couple of episodes. So be sure to tune in and check it out, because I learn a ton from the people that we interview, and we hope that you do too.